Hello, everyone, and welcome to Snap Judgments. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official podcast of Marvel Snap Zone, and we've got some things to talk about. I've never done a video like this before. I don't plan on making it a regular thing, but there are some major controversies, major topics of discussion happening in the Marvel Snap community, and I feel like we have to take a fair look at them and make some determinations. We need to discuss, does Alioth need a nerf? And I'm aware that's not how you say it. That's how I say it because I like it that way. Do Loki and Bloodstone indicate that Marvel Snap is a pay to win game? I think we need to fully examine both of these questions to really determine whether or not this is the case for both situations. In addition, though, we're not doing our regular deck guides that we do every day on this channel. Every day here, we do two different deck guides where we have like a full turn by turn guide. We're not doing the turn by turn today. I still have two new trial decks that can help you beat Alioth, and three other decks that are proven top contenders that don't run Loki or Elsa that can win at a high 60% win rate at the top of the meta. So we are not going to do full deck guides for these decks, but I still have plenty of new decks for you today, as is the channel's promise. Hopefully you find value in this. Hopefully you find today's discussion interesting enough to hit that sub button, to like, to comment. I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. It's totally free to you. We do our best to bring you the best Snap content every single weekday here on this channel. We've never missed a weekday since we started on this channel, so you know you're going to get some good stuff every day. Hit that sub button. Before we begin, this is one of my favorite comic panels ever. It's from an issue of Squirrel Girl. She's fighting Mole Man, and Mole Man, I'm just reading it to you. You accept my version of events, and Squirrel Girl answers in one of my favorite quotes ever. Dude, I accept the truth of your lived experiences. I'm not going to tell you your feelings are wrong. I'm not. If you believe that Alioth is the most OP thing that has ever happened in Marvel Snap, and you hate it and want it deleted, you are valid. You have every right to feel that way, to believe that. Same thing as if you believe Marvel Snap is totally pay to win. I'm not trying to tell you what your perspective should be. Instead, I'm giving you my perspective, and I'm hoping that you will at least hear my version of events and accept the truth of my lived experiences. And here's how I considered it and what brought me to these conclusions. You find that valid? Cool. If not, hey, no hard feelings. This is Alioth. Alioth is a Series 5 card, which means 6,000 tokens. You either open Spotlight caches a few weeks ago or at the start of November to get him, or you spend 6,000 tokens. I open Spotlight caches personally. He's a 6/5, unreveal, destroy all enemy cards played here this turn, including unrevealed cards. And a lot of the problem with Alioth is very often that unrevealed cards means that he's killing things before their on reveals happen, and he's killing multiple things. So he can just wipe out a lane before you can do anything if he has priority. That's an extremely powerful card. Almost certainly the best 6-drop in the game right now. There's a couple others, I think 3 others I'd consider at least in the argument, but it's extremely likely that Alioth is the most powerful 6-cost card in the game. Let's keep going. So what makes him so good? He wins a lane if you're already ahead on the last turn. There's very few ways to win that lane in Marvel Snap on that last turn that will override Alioth. That's totally fine. That is an absolutely phenomenal ability, and there's no other comparable closer at 6. The best others are Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is the only other 6 I think is like straight up comparable in terms of like raw power played to the board. Doom can be as good as Alioth. There are no general cards that even come close to touching Alioth or Doom. Magneto and She-Hulk are probably the next best two, and let's be completely honest. Magneto's utility is that he messes up if the meta is a bunch of 4-cost cards, right? That's an extremely powerful thing he can do, but it's not completely game breaking. She-Hulk, meanwhile's ability is kind of destroyed by Mobius, but she is a 6, so she gives you the ability to play a 9 and then play other things to end the game. Neither one of these come anywhere close to Alioth or Doom, so Alioth and Doom are right there at the very top. There are other 6s that can match the power, that can fundamentally win a lane and win the game for you. They are Null, Evolved Hulk, Apocalypse, and Hela. The problem is, all 4 of those go in hyper-specific decks. You're not running a lot of kill, evolutionary, or discard. You're basically left with either don't run a 6, run Doom, or run Alioth, which is obviously a problem, right? It means that Alioth is going to make it to an awful lot of decks, just like a couple weeks ago Doom was. And Doom got nerfed for that already. Doom was the most played card in the game for a while because he was the only 6 at this power level that made it get played. So Doom had his Doombots nerfed to 6/4. Alioth is next up, it certainly seems, for a potential nerf of that type. Those of you who are new here, Leader and Arrow were two previous closers at the end of the game that were nerfed. Leader used to copy your opponent's entire last turn, which was completely insane. Everything they did, Leader copied. Leader had your whole board. Arrow used to move every opponent card to the location Arrow was played at that was played on the left, which meant if you were either ahead by a billion in one lane or had already lost one lane and they weren't going to commit more there, you could move whatever they were going to play there. Both of those were extremely strong cards. Both of those were closers that fundamentally shut down the end of the game. They, along with they made basically Doom unplayable. They were like every deck basically ran Arrow or Leader or like I guess Surfer for a little while because Surfer was so strong. But they were in almost everything. There were ways to play around them. Arrow was basically fill the lane where you read they were going to arrow, and Leader was play your weaker cards first, so that if the lane filled, it filled by copying your weaker cards, and then your strong cards would still appear. There were ways to play around them, but they were extremely limiting in Marvel Snap. Now, what's different here? What's different here, and this is so important, is that Leader and Arrow could do that in any lane. They didn't care about a lane. Their ability was going to happen as long as they weren't Cosmoed, and Cosmo was the only real counter at that point. So Leader and Arrow were extremely strong, but they were also extremely strong in a way that basically ignored one of the fundamental rules of the game. So Alioth does have that on Leader and Arrow. I think it's fair to argue that Alioth, while extremely powerful, is more balanced than Leader and Arrow, even though there's ways to play around all of them. That Leader and Arrow were multi-lane answers and Alioth is a one-lane answer was a change. Is a change that makes those two cards as they were better than Alioth is. But there is an important lesson here. That important lesson is one that we all had to learn. You would make your play and you have a mental checklist, or you should, and if you don't, you need to start a mental checklist of what you think they can do on the last turn of the game. For that last turn, that mental checklist was you would go through everything, you go, but wait, what if they arrow there? And then you would stop what you were doing, say, how likely is it for them to have arrow? Pretty likely, one of the best closers in the game, right? And you would say, okay, so I need to fill this lane or arrow beats me. If arrow beats me in that situation, and I can't do anything about it, it's time to run. Doesn't matter if they have arrow or not. You need to start doing that for Alioth if you don't want to go completely crazy about it. You need to start saying, I am going to go through my mental checklist of cards. If they play Alioth in this lane, can I win? And sometimes that's going to be a 50-50, right? The 50-50 you usually take. 50-50s are completely fine. They Alioth one lane and you have a choice of two lanes. You can win one, not the other. Go for it. But you need to mentally checklist, do they have Alioth? If they play Alioth here, how do I win? And if the answer is I just don't, you know they're running Alioth. The deck is likely to run Alioth. They have a 75% chance to have seen it that game. Just run. All right. I think this is fairly informative. The most popular Alioth deck from rank 40 to 70 is a 1.49 human rate with a 73.5% win rate. That's completely broken. That's like unacceptably broken. While the most popular Alioth post infinite is 0.46 and 56.8% win rate. The second is a regular tier 1 deck. The first is the most broken thing that's ever happened in the game. There are two possible explanations. One is that there's a huge skill difference in people from 40 to 70 and post infinite. I think that's likely true. I think people that regularly get infinite and post infinite are likely better at Snap than the people from 40 to 70. And I think one of the reasons is that checklist we talked. The other reason I think is likely is mirrors. If both players have Alioth, and that's more likely post infinite, right? If both players have Alioth, well, guess what? That's a 50-50 proposition. One wins, one loses every single time. So far, so good. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The truth is probably some of that literally completely absurd 1.03 average cube rate is made up of skill, and some of it is made up of mirrors taking the edge off. Because Alioth isn't enough post-infinite decks to help that balance out. That is not a conclusive data point. Please don't assume too much of one or the other, but if we assume that that difference is reasonably evenly split, and it's probably not, then there is an argument that we need to A, learn how to play around Alioth more, and B, that he's still in too many decks if the mirrors are accounting for that larger percentage. Credit to Norin XP for pulling these stats over on Twitter. So how do you counter? The first thing you do is you remember it exists. You need that last turn mental checklist, but even earlier, you need to be making sure that you're ahead on lanes by enough that Alioth's not going to beat you there. If you're ahead by 8 in a lane, you know they can't Alioth there, right? Alioth doesn't win them that lane, so you don't have to worry about it. If you can get ahead by more than 5 in multiple lanes, you'll be fine. Another way is to go small and wide. If you're dropping like 8 power in one lane and 12 power in another lane, and you've already won the third lane, their Alioth has stopped you in one place, you still won the other, it doesn't matter. Bounce does this, Loki does this, different stuff along those lines does that. Another way is you can keep big in priority so Alioth can't beat you with stuff like Red Skull. A basic play pattern for an all Series 3 deck is Armor in lane 1, Sauron in lane 1 or 2, it could be anything in lane 1 or 2 here, Shuri in lane 2, Red Skull in lane 2. Unless they ramped, they cannot Alioth that Red Skull, and very few Alioth decks are running Shang-Chi. You've now won that lane. Now you go back to that armor lane and play Taskmaster. That's 28 power. They had nowhere to Alioth. Enjoy your win. Marvel Snap. Yep. Cool. How do you counter at part 2? You can use cards that move to counter. Moving Vision into a lane where Alioth will be played. 8 is greater than 5, and Alioth doesn't kill Vision. You usually win there as long as you stayed close enough. Doom into another lane or Silk moving will do the job of at least tying it, so that if you were slightly ahead in that lane, that will win. We're going to have to remember this to talk about in one more. After the slides. But Doom and Silk are extremely important for that. Armor and Cosmo both work. I particularly am fond of Armor here. I think Armor is really great in the meta. I think that Destroy is just enough of a presence, and turning off Alioth with 3 power, that's only 2 less than Alioth has, is really great. I think Cosmo's a little harder to play and is more likely to mess with your stuff, but hey. And I think Goose should probably go in more of these bounce style decks, more of these smaller decks. Goose gives you a safe place to play a card like Hitmonkey, or means you don't have to commit nearly as much to win a lane. So I think Goose seems really, really. Next, various Loki and Elsa decks just beat it. They just straight up roll the face off of Alioth decks as a general rule. For the past 3 weeks, we've done a million videos with gameplay guides on all of these decks. So just go back and watch previous videos to do that. But we're gonna look at a few other decks we can try. We're gonna look at 3 proven decks. These are decks that from 80 to post infinite have a 60+% win rate in a reasonable sample of games. I believe my cutoff was 150. And we're going to do 2 fully Theorycraft decks that I have not tested against Alioth yet, but should basically do the job for at least a lot of the meta. So let's take a look first. Our first deck is Shuri. This is the highest win rate deck I found. People have been putting Alioth in Shuri, and it seems like Doom is better. The stats seem to suggest that Doom is better. When people see that Red Skull or that Vision, they know what to do, and they plan. And sometimes they plan for Alioth, but they almost never really plan for Doom. So you can just Doom right in that Red Skull lane. If they play Alioth, you can still win that lane, right? You still have that Armor Taskmaster play I outlined earlier. So Doom can help you just win that Alioth lane while giving you enough power in another lane to win. There's a lot to really, really like here. I think that this is one of the best ways to beat Alioth. Straight up discard is really, really good against Alioth. You don't need the Dock and Silver Samurai version if you don't have those cards. I just like them, so they're here. Silver Samurai tends to be halfway decent against these decks. because like everything they have is 5 power, and if you're discarding one of their 5 power things, you're pretty happy, right? Um, but the basic idea here is that like you're trying to win one lane with like Dracula, right? Like you've got one lane that's got like a Lady Sif and a Modoc, and I don't know, a Morbius, and you've got Dracula in another lane, and you've got a couple Apocalypse discards. Your standard Alioth deck can't beat that, right? Your Morbius Sif Modoc is like 15, 20 power. Your Dracula is 16 to 20 power. They can't touch you. They can't get that high. You should be able to beat most of those decks with this. And if you need one more step, then the Dakin Silver Samurai thing can go for like a storm package most of the time. And then you can win another lane that way. This is again one of the more powerful things you can do for that particular match. Iron Patriot, a lot of people run Alioth in this. The one that won a tournament this weekend ran Alioth. You don't need to. You don't even need Mobius. I like Mobius here, but you don't really need Mobius. Mobius is here for because Loki is a card, and when they can get all your stuff cheap, it's kind of a problem. But like Iron Patriot is really solid against Alioth, right? Um, your last turn play is Doom. You can play Doom in a lane you've already won where they would never Alioth, and then you're at least matching Alioth in one lane and you're going big in the others. You should still have priority at the very least because you've got Brood and Absorbing Man. You've also got extra pumps for that, like Iron Lad, Blue Marvel, Patriot, and Iron Man to make sure that you're winning. Like, there's a lot to like here. I think Iron Patriot's one of the 2 or 3 best decks in the game. I think Alioth can fit in it, but I think the Doom versions are fine. And outside, well, Iron Lad's a problem, right? So I'm almost more sympathetic to the Iron Lad is busted and being kept out of spotlights argument than anything else. I hate that Iron Lad isn't around. I think it's the most important card to save for if you'd like to basically compete before New Year's. But I think that Iron Lad is extraordinarily important and worth saving up tokens slash spend. The rest, but this deck, otherwise, if you have Lad, you don't need Mobius. This deck handles most Alioth decks. Now we're on to my theory crafts. So my logic here is fundamentally I've got Goose, right? It's if I can lock up one lane with a card like Bishop, and Bishop is really good. All it does is grow. If I can lock up a lane with Bishop, I can throw Kitty into another lane, and I'm probably going to beat Alioth. I don't know what they're supposed to do about that. There's versions of this that run like um, Elsa. If you have Elsa, you can throw Elsa in probably over like a Mobius or Luke. You can throw armor in. You can drop armor early, and then toward the end of the game, that's where you end up hitmonkeying. And I'm aware this deck has 2 Series 5 cards. You still have to have good cards to compete in Marvel Snap. You just have to be smart about your spotlight cash opening if you don't want to spend. But if you have Hitmonkey, you have Kitty Pride, and you have Mobius, this should be extremely strong between Goose and armor and making sure your opponent's Alioth isn't a problem. And like if you see a Mobius, what you don't do is Sarah. I think this is probably a really, really strong ladder deck. Because on ladder, well, bots just die horribly to Sarah because they don't see all the power they're gonna put out. And they don't like see the Shadow King and so on. So like you should just be able to like eat bots. But beyond that, you just have a lot of power. Bast has a negative effect on Sarah of 1 whole power, but hitting a Kitty Pride, Angela, Bishop, or Mysterio is far more worth it. So I threw Bast into this deck. I see Bast not in a lot of these decks. And I'm always like, well, if you're not running multiple 4 power things, I think you should probably be running Bast. But Armor and Goose should do a really, really great job of protecting your end game. And if you spend like turn 2 on Angela and turn 2 on Goose and turn 4 on Armor, right? Or you play them both on, then you play Sarah on a different lane on turn 5, and you just go off on turn 6. That Alioth's usually not beating you. You can usually get big enough to just sort of stomp them out by just playing like your Mysterio Hitmonkey. Just be careful not to play too much of that Sarah lane because that stuff probably won't reveal. I believe that means it won't count for Hitmonkey, which is actually completely obnoxious. But yeah, this should absolutely handle Alioth decks, as should a Surfer version of the same basic concept. Um, this one adds in Juggernaut and Cosmo. It doesn't bother to run armor. Cosmo is a 3, so it's better for Surfer. Um, it's also got Goose again, and this should just work the same basic way. You win a lane with Storm Juggernaut, right? And then you drop either Goose in another lane or Cosmo in another lane. You should be able to grab priority this way, right? And if you have priority that way, um, Then you can drop Cosmo in the lane. They're gonna have to Alioth. You can even Surfer then Cosmo, and you just win. You can also Spider-Man that away, so on and so forth. There's a lot of really powerful ways to win with this deck. Um, I think this is also probably solid against Bounce, which really wants the space to play and hates Shadow King and hates Killmonger. So like there's a lot to like here. I think that this is very likely to be extremely powerful. Not sure why this deck went away, except that everyone sort of got scared of Sarah with Mobius in the meta, but I don't think it's that bad. And if it is, you can re-add Rogue. So those are the decks. Got one more thing. Final thoughts. If you want Alioth, make sure you have four Spotlight caches for the week of November 8th. That means you've got less than a month as of this point, and you can guarantee yourself just by finishing your dailies every day and getting Spotlight caches to have Alioth. If after all this you still think he's busted, you must have him. Cool. Get him. I don't think he's broken. It's okay if you still do. We disagree, but like I don't think he's fun. I think he's actively a no fun card. There's like 17 fundamental tweaks that could happen that I think would make him a more interesting card. But I think the fix is kind of twofold. First, make him a 6/4. If he's a 6/4, and I've heard this ever, I think the first time I heard anyone say this, it was Lambie, but make him a 6/4. So Doom, Silk, and Spider-Man beat. If Doom, Silk, and Spider-Man beat him, then the move cards, the change cards are enough bigger than him that I don't think he's nearly as oppressive. At that point, he should be able to be played around by fundamentally everyone. It's that Doom and Silk tie him that is very often. The other thing you can do is you can make other sixes as good as Alioth and Doom. We know that a lot of sixes are coming in the December patch. We've got Shadow King and we've got Firestarter. If either of these are meta cards, watch yourself see less Alioth. We need metagame warping 6-cost cards. We have those, then Alioth will automatically go down, as NC and Doom aren't the only options for him. We're on to part 2 of today's video. The claim is Loki and Elsa Bloodstone make Snap pay to win. I'm going to tell you, I'm less sympathetic to this, I think, in many ways, than I am to about the Alioth claim. It's not incorrect, despite my less sympathy for it. Let's go through it. This is Loki. Loki is last season pass card. Series 5 on reveal, replace your hands with cards from your opponent's starting deck, give them -1. We saw that this was an extraordinarily powerful card. We'll talk more about what made it so powerful as we go forward. We've also got Elsa Bloodstone, Series 5 Season Pass. If you play another card to fill a location, give it +3 power. +3 is a lot. That's pre-nerf Surfer. Almost nothing in the game gives +3 because of how great it is, and this card is extremely abusable. Even if it's only, quote-unquote, only a 2/8. A 2/8 is still absolutely way ahead of the curve in Snap. These two are great, but the claim is that season passes are pay to win. So August was Dakin. Dakin's a good card, but nothing special. July is Phoenix Force, which had to be buffed mid-season to even be playable. It's now a good card. Again, no one's calling it broken. June was Ghost Spider, which again had to be buffed and is still very good, but not great. May is Nebula, who came out at the exact same time that they gave everyone Kitty Pryde, which was basically killed Nebula, even though Nebula is again still a good card that goes in a lot of decks. It's not broken. April is Hitmonkey. Hitmonkey is great, ended up nerfed, but wasn't great for another 2 or 3 seasons before we went anywhere with it. So like Hitmonkey was very, very powerful, but it's not like meta breaking, meta warping, completely busted. Nimrod had to be buffed before it was playable. MODOK was unplayable upon release, and eventually became good down the line. And January and December, Zabu and Surfer, which are 2 of the most busted cards ever. So it's been 8 months, and I know I wrote Modal, sorry. It's been 8 months since we had really, really great season pass cards. We had the Hitmonkey, which is very, very good, 2 months after its release. And then we just have sort of a bunch of okay to good cards. Hard to, looking at history, make the claim that season passes are always going to be pay to win and meta breaking, even if for 2 months they were. Um, Glenn was asked about this. So, do we want to make season pass cards extremely strong? And I'm going to read you his answer because I think it's important. Glenn Jones, by the way, for anyone who's unaware, is the lead designer of Marvel. He does all the balance, he designs most of the cards, etc. It's an express goal of ours that new cards be impactful, especially the season pass. When they're not, it can feel like we don't add content to the game for our players. For that reason, we'd rather be slightly too bold when it's close. Plus, if we theme a season around our character, it's even more important to capture the season's theme and the excitement in the gameplay. If the most exciting card during Loki season is Shuri, we messed up. Because game balance isn't an exact science, we won't always hit our mark just right, and we'll also miss in both directions. Used a few examples of overpowered things, that would be Elsa and Loki. But we can also look at Nimrod, Ghost Spider, Phoenix Force releasing a little too weak, while Nebula and Dakin have been just perfect. And when we do overreach, we have tools available to ensure we nudge things into place. So, have they been nudging things? Are they following through with this promise? Is this accurate? I think it's complicated for Loki. First off, Loki is great. He's an absolutely fantastic card by any definition. But, and this is important, I think this is extremely underrated. Excuse me. He's a whole deck archetype to himself. There are now Loki decks. I'm going to go back 2 slides. There are decks that play Dakin, there aren't Dakin decks. There are decks that play Ghost Spider, there aren't Ghost Spider decks. There are decks that play Nebula, there aren't Nebula decks. There were Phoenix Force decks. Hitmonkey was only a thing in other bounce decks. It was part of a deck. It wasn't a Hitmonkey deck. It was a bounce deck, a Kitty Pryde deck. There are eventually Nimrod decks. There are eventually MODOK decks, right? Zabu wasn't a deck. Zabu was an enabler. Zabu was a deck for a very short time. Surfer is the last season pass card who we can say was, upon its release, a successful deck. For non-season pass cards, I think High Evolutionary is the last card that became a deck all to himself, that became an actual archetype that you could just be like, oh, it's a Surfer deck. Oh, it's a Phoenix deck. Oh, it's an Evolutionary deck. Oh, it's a Loki deck. That's important. That means nerfing him takes an entire deck out of the game. That's rough, right? Removing a deck from the game when we don't get that many new decks is rough. Also, he's way better in the hands of top players. The more you go down the ranks, it's almost the exact opposite problem of Alioth. The more you go down the ranks, the less impressive Loki's stats are. So do you nerf him to make him worse for top players, but then unplayable for the vast majority of people? I don't know. I honestly do not know. And how much do you factor in that they knew Mobius was coming, and Mobius would and has brought Loki back down to Earth. Still great, but no longer in a league of its own. I think all of this makes Loki an extremely complicated card to balance and not easy, as many have sort of said, why don't you just make him do this? Why don't you just make him do that? Because all of these confounding factors make Loki a complicated thing to discuss. Elsa is less complicated. She goes in most decks. +3 is a lot in Snap. I think she's going to be adjusted, but it's literally been a week. We're on a week in like 2 days right now. She may be adjusted. I fully expect she will be adjusted, but I think claims of her being pay to win are premature. Again, we won't always hit our mark just right, and we'll also miss in both directions. We have tools available to ensure we nudge things into place. Sorry, into place. I added the by accident. So we have an answer for those two, at least to some extent. How much you accept that is true is fine, but we know that Ms. Marvel is coming and may continue the trend of busted season pass cards and Shadow King, but like Shadow King's 2 months away and like very early data mined, we don't know how much he's going to change. Let's not jump to conclusions. Ms. Marvel's a 4/5 ongoing. Adjacent locations where your cards have unique costs have +5 power. That seems like it might be good, but that seems also like a totally new deck. I don't know how that fits into anything that we have right now, because 4 cost cards usually want to be in like Zabu decks, but does Zabu really work right now? And now we have to figure out how to run like different 3s and 5s in different locations, and like, does it count if there's 0? Does 0 count as a cost here? So if you have like no cards there, would that count? If you have no cards and then add a Widow's Bite, how does, like, this is going to be complicated. I think this is probably good, but I would like to remind everyone we all thought Loki would be bad. We all thought Legion would be bad. We thought Ghost was going to be good. We thought X-23 was going to be meta shaping. We never really know. It may continue the trend, it may not. It may not. Balancing cards to get them just right is hard. I think this card's going to be good. Do I think this card's going to be busted? Maybe. I don't expect this card straight up. I don't expect this card as previewed to be nearly as good as either Loki or Elsa. Is that enough? If it's still really good, we don't know yet. Do you need these cards? Do you need Loki and Elsa? Do you need to pay to get these cards? Well, first, comparison is the thief of joy. I honestly believe that comparing too much to other games is genuinely negative. Try and focus within the realm you're in, the context you're in. However, Snap is better than basically every other gacha game, and seemingly middle of the pack for card games. How acceptable you think that is again up to you. I think better than gacha games is sort of a given. I wouldn't play it if it was worse, but I'm fine paying for a card game in the middle. Maybe you're not. That's fine. It is digital cardboard. I get that. So 5 decks are tier 1 right now, according to Marvel Snap Zone. Elsa is in 3 and Alioth is in 3. Loki is 1. That one has Elsa in it also. Alioth is in 2 other Elsa decks, one without Elsa. And Shuri Red Skull has neither. The best version of Shuri Red Skull does not run Alioth, does not run Elsa. They can go in them, but they're not in the best version by the stats, at least for ladder. You can compete without any one of these. If you used your spotlights on Alioth, you have at least one, very likely 2 decks that you can play. If you have the pure Series 3 Shuri Red Skull, the best version of the deck, you can compete. Another thing worth knowing, anything can get infinite. I promise you. Spend a little bit on Twitter. Check Bootman's document. Every month, Bootman puts out a document where he just writes down links to every infinite deck he can find. Anything get infinite. People are still hitting infinite with Galactus. One of our friends, Keen, hits infinite every season with Quake. That deck will be coming soon on this channel. Anything can hit infinite. Anything can win an infinity. I won with a Gene Surfer High Evolutionary deck. I won with a Phoenix Force deck before they were a thing. Anything can win infinity in Conquest. Where this is a real problem is absolute top level competition or tournaments. Got it? This is a real problem. If you think this is a problem for tournaments, are you personally okay with the top tournament decks? Are you competing these tournaments for it to matter to you? But even more than that, are you okay with the tournament decks having a pay to win element? Debatable, right? I personally am. I think if you're going to compete at the very top of the game, putting some money in makes sense. $10 a month seems reasonable to compete at the top levels of the game, but hey, it's up to you. I personally think of this as pay to win more. You can win without these cards, but you need to plan better. You need to make sure that you're thinking of things in advance. You need to make sure you're waiting until as late as possible to open spotlight caches to make sure that you're opening only the most powerful cards, stuff like that. How do you do this? So, my honest advice is to treat Marvel Snap like it's got a $10 monthly subscription. That's what I do. I know that that's what our friend Lauren whatever does, and she gets all the cards. So, you treat Snap like it's a $10 monthly subscription. If you won't spend, you can still compete, but you'll be behind the meta decks. You can still hit infinite, you still get infinity, you can still climb in infinity. But it's going to take time and patience. It's going to take planning. If you can't live with that, then Snap may not. Very sorry. If that's like completely a deal breaker, then that doesn't seem like it's going to change. You might not want Snap. With time, though, you can still get basically every card that way. I did an old video that showed how to do this. I'm going to update it. I'm hoping this weekend. It might be a couple days later. Work is a thing. I got to find time with work. But I plan to do another video, hopefully this weekend, that says, here is how you can get every card with that $10 monthly subscription with different strategies for if you're early Series 3 versus if you're late game with most of the Series 4 and 5 cards. what the strategy is, what the plan is, how you should try to go about getting every card. What is the most efficient way? But what if you can't afford the $10 a month? There's a Bootman video where he goes over 5 different ways that you can get $10 a month for doing various stuff online. Do that stuff, get the pseudo $10, and get your monthly subscription. I do 15 season passes a month. That's all I can afford, to be perfectly honest. I do 15 season passes a month in a giveaway. I know a lot of other creators do season pass giveaways. Enter, try to win. I'm going to create a document again this weekend. It should be up with the video about how to get every card that lists every giveaway I know of. It's going to just have a link to every giveaway every season as soon as I see it. It's going to include giveaways for everything from clothes to season passes, and I'll just categorize it by apparel, websites, and in-game stuff, season passes, and other in-game goods. And if you can just keep that document, I'm going to keep it in the description to all my videos once I make it this weekend. Don't have time during the week. Once I make it this weekend, and you can enter all the giveaways. Support all the creators you want, and just enter every giveaway, and we'll do our best to make sure that you can get a season pass some way. And if you live in certain parts of the world, and this is where I really feel bad, in certain parts of the world, $10 a month is an awful lot more than it is in America. I'm very sorry. I don't have a good answer for that. I don't think Second Dinner has a good answer for that, and I don't think that's fair. I don't have an answer, and I'm very sorry. I really hope that you win a giveaway because I'm not sure what else can be done in that instance. If anyone has advice or an opinion on that, I would love to hear it for how Second Dinner can really fix that issue. I think it's a problem. All right, that Bootman video is linked right here in the description to this very video. You will find this slideshow. Cool. You can watch the Bootman video, 5 tips to fund your Marvel Snap habit, and get those tips. Not going to watch that right now. That's Bootman. Hi, Bootman. Final thoughts. Hopefully you found this interesting. I don't know if I changed your perspective, but hopefully I allowed you to have a more informed perspective wherever it is your opinion lies at the end of it. You now know where I stand. Hopefully you found value. Hopefully you hit sub. Tomorrow I'll be back with 2 at least brand new decks and a second video tomorrow where I give you at least 15 new decks for the coming. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you having the patience to bear with me. Appreciate your support of me and Snap. Peace.